what is your lane? What I'm doing is proven. I stay out of those lanes and I stay in mine.
Straight out the lab. Straight out the lab, joined today by somebody who's become a friend, part of the fam, renowned as a speaker coach in the industry, world's best by many, Rene Rodriguez. We are going to talk about why you are here on Straight Out the Lab and also get into the details of how you and I connected. You are now my coach, and we've been working now together for, well, how long have we been working together now? For some months, right?
Feels like years, but it's been months.
Yeah, I put a stress on a lot of people, unfortunately, yeah. You had head of hair when we first met, too. That's the stress I brought into your life.
That's as far as we go back, yes.
No, but we have certainly connected and hit it off. Thanks to, you got to pop this off from the top of the show, the muscle, Keaton.
Yes.
Him and I, obviously, we've got a fantastic relationship, and I've seen this guy, my gosh, just hit the highest of highs now with all his speaking and how he's transformed in this world too. But it's all down to you, somebody that he regards as, you know, his backbone in getting to the levels he's at right now. And when I was at Keaton's house and seeing his transformation, he kept on mentioning this name, this person. And then I had the introduction, and Keaton was like, Flex, this is going to be your coach. You need to work with one another. And as I said, we hit it off with a bang, and here we are today. And it's an honor to have you here. You've flown all the way from Minnesota to have a couple of days with myself, locking the door. Whiteboard there is being smashed with all new information. So from me to you, thank you so much. I know we're going to get into the details, but, you know, it's great to have you on the show.
It's an honor to be here, my friend. It truly is. And go back to Keaton. Keaton was already an incredible, powerful human and an amazing speaker. And being able to sort of get him some of the different techniques and getting him to tap into who he was, and in a lot of ways just reminding him of what I already knew he believed. And so I think that's what a lot of this is about. And the same thing that we're doing with you. I mean, I'm looking forward to it. It's an honor, and being here at the Lair is really cool. Yeah,
you have definitely not only been transforming others, but you've had a major transformation yourself. And I want to talk about that later on in the show, but I have been really getting into the depth of keynote speaking, and it's such a fascinating and scary world. It reminds me so much of bodybuilding. I know I've mentioned this on the show a few times, but it's the closest thing to being up on that bodybuilding stage for me. Yeah. Because in preparation, again, if you've not done the unseen, you're going to look like an absolute fool up on stage, right? Just like bodybuilding. So it's all about, and I kind of cliche this now, reps and sets. And I've been to now 3 of your masterminds. I've been, again, a student. I've also spoken. And for anybody who hasn't attended one of your mastermind, who is interested in getting into speaking, what would this mastermind entail? Because I can say from my perspective, and I will, but you set these masterminds up after 30 years of being in this world, and you've perfected this craft. And I want to get into, obviously, them details as well. But a mastermind for a student, what does that entail? If somebody's watching this that wants to get into public speaking, keynote speaking.
Well, I think that we have our mastermind, which would be our 1.5-day event where we bring together some of the coolest minds, you being one of them, you know, Clinton Sparks to Neil Ford and LaShawn Merritt, 3-time gold medalist. And amazing people to come together to really share ideas. But Amplify is the course that we went through, that you went through, to really hone in on the skill set. And what you said is true. I mean, like, speaking, why I think you relate so well to it and why it's like bodybuilding is in bodybuilding, you're going on stage in Speedos for an entire audience, millions of people in your case, to judge you. And you will be exposed if you didn't eat right, if you cheated, if you didn't do the right things physically and aesthetically. Mm-hmm. Keynote speaking is the same thing, except you'll be exposed for your ideas, for your thoughts, for your beliefs, for your identity, for who you are. There's a reason why it's so feared, because you are being put on a stage for people to judge whether your idea makes sense, whether your delivery is engaging, whether you're boring, whether you're somebody that has something that's thought-provoking or it's cliche. I mean, it's such a crowded space that it's it's harder than people think, but yet it's also more attainable than people realize.
Yeah, and for the audience that are listening, it's not just big stages.
Right.
A lot of the people that were there were in various different genres of business: real estate, banking, mortgages. They're all trying to home in their craft to speak better in front of small crowds to bigger crowds. Some people have their own coaching groups, but they're all hired you to perfect that craft. And what I've learned by sitting back as a student from day 1 to day 3, so many dramatic improvements, even on myself, because when I'm sitting there and listening and seeing you change people's, verbiage, posture, and there's so much, like you said, that goes into this, the confidence that grows from everybody. Also, you create an environment that, regardless of who is in that room, Mr. Olympias to Olympic medalists, to somebody that is maybe the best real estate agent in, the Southeast, whatever it would be.
To a 17-year-old.
To a 17-year-old. You drop all the egos. You have such a skill that, again, obviously people have spoken about this prior to even you and I meeting, but you have this skill to make sure that there's a safe room. And, I didn't know what I was walking into on my first Amplify. But soon enough, I felt very comfy in that room where I didn't have to try to be somebody. I could just be myself and be a student. And of course, yes, I spoke and told my story. But even while I was telling my story and after the fact, then they kind of, the whole class then, not in a sense grades you, but how can you improve that story? As long as you've dropped that ego and you're willing to receive that critical, change, that's the only way you grow. And you've created that safe space and an environment where people truly, truly want to see the best of one another. And I've already made friends from the first that I've now got to see in the second, the third, and now I have opportunities to speak on other stages. And again, it's just how you have this gift to see the best version of people, whether it's somebody who's petrified in generally in just speaking, or somebody who's spoken on over 100 stages. And just to cite a side story, one of the gentlemen I mentioned just now was spoken on over 100 stories, over 100 stages, and even he was having these aha moments. And it was incredible for me because, again, I've spoken on multiple stages, but now I'm moving into new chapters, which, again, I want to talk about. But was this a gift you've always had?
No. It's one, thank you for everything you're saying. It's that means a lot. And I think I'm good at it because I was never good at it. And it was something that was very hard for me to do. A lot of social anxiety, insecurity, not being somebody that knew how to use words. As a kid, I didn't know how to talk back, so I was always fighting. And so learning how to actually communicate an idea and not being somebody that was the talented one, you had to learn what were the things that the charismatic kids, the ones that people listen to, what was it that they did differently? And I would just watch. And you realize that there's a pattern to it. And then you realize there's a science to it. So my background in behavioral neuroscience was really focused on how do I create and understand the process of change? Because all we're talking about is change, right? Changing a behavior, change how you speak, change how you stand, how you communicate the sequence and everything. But the biggest piece was realizing that speaking is one outlet of what we actually talk about. Because really what we're talking about is not speaking, it's influence. And influence happens silently. It happens when you speak. It happens when you walk. It happens how you dress. It happens to the sequence of how you say things. And, a lot of people focus on getting comfortable on stage. And what I tell them is that your comfort on stage has nothing to do with your effectiveness on stage. Because we know a lot of people that are very comfortable being very boring on stage or very comfortable being very egotistical on stage. And so the comfort isn't the goal. I know people that are extremely uncomfortable moving me to tears, moving me to life change, and they're trembling, and all of the quote unquote things that they shouldn't be doing, they're doing, but yet I'm being affected. And so what we want is to get people to realize that your goal is influence, and that applies one-on-one. And so a stage to me isn't just a stage. We're on a stage right now, and there's no real stage, but there's people watching. When you walk from your car to the front door of a potential client, they might be watching you. That's a stage. And so there's a stage, every phone call, every face-to-face interaction. Those are all stages. And when you realize that you're being watched and observed, whether you like it or not, it's happening. Unconsciously, implicitly, explicitly, people are watching and they're making judgments. That's what the human system is designed. And so we look at, okay, how do we set the chess pieces up in play to best suit what we're trying to accomplish? And so a lot of people will say, well, that's manipulation. Okay, well, let's talk about that for a minute. There's a big difference between influence and manipulation. Manipulation is has a very specific, from what I've in my research found, very, very specific definition. One of them is that it's the use of persuasion and influence to an extreme, so that an extreme use of it. Second, at the expense of someone else. So there's a zero-sum game. I win, you lose. And third, it's done underhandedly. You don't know what's happening. Influence, to me, is done where we both win. We're driving towards something that is a solution that I believe will serve you versus one that will hurt you, and can be done explicitly. I can tell you that I want to persuade you in this. I'm very passionate about this. I believe very heavily in this. So I'm telling you, I believe in something. And so the difference is, and people that say that it's unethical, every human since we were born is designed to want to influence the world around them. Children learn puppy dog eyes because they know it's very influential. Women are highly influential when they want to be. Men can be highly influential. And so we realize that influence has such a deeper impact on our life. And so the best way to understand it probably is to think of the opposite. So imagine walking into a room and no one noticing, telling a joke, no one laughing, sharing an idea, no one caring, selling a product and no one buying, casting a vision, no one following. How would you feel?
Oh, great.
It'd be horrible, right? Some people would say invisible, lonely. I think the word I use is insignificant.
Yeah.
That I have no impact. So I am insignificant. I can speak, nothing happens. I don't speak, nothing happens. So my participation in this activity, if I felt that way in a meeting, I'd ask myself, why am I in this meeting? If I felt that way in a relationship, I'd probably ask myself, why am I in this relationship? If I felt that way at work, I'd be like, why do I work here? Sadly, too many people walk around feeling that way in life. And they start asking, why am I even here? But that question of why am I here begs the question of what's my purpose? So let's bring influence back. You walk in a room, people notice. You tell a joke, people laugh. You share an idea, people love it. Sell the product, people are buying. You cast a vision, and you watch people mobilize and take action. How are you feeling now?
Oh, top of the world.
Top of the world, right? And I think that's a great way of saying it, because I think that having influence is one of the greatest of human experiences. Not having it is one of the worst. And so when we look at it from that perspective, we're looking at influence being that mark that we make on the world. It's where we know our purpose is, because we go, okay, I'm in a meeting and I feel significant. I know why I'm here. I'm here to move this to there. If I'm in a relationship and I feel valuable and visible and significant, I know why I'm here. If I feel that way at work, I know why I work here. And if I walk around going, hey, I can influence this world around me, I know why I'm here. And so to influence and purpose are so closely connected, in my opinion. And so when you're getting on a stage, if you want to take the stage, the work begins way before the content. The work begins with what you and I did out there, saying, who is Flex? What is the ethos of you? What is that thing that you do so effortlessly? And that when you're outside of that ethos, it just feels awkward. It feels uncomfortable. And so many people right now are finding themselves in that position for social media. They're trying to follow a trend. Well, what if that trend has nothing to do with what you're skilled at? It's like, for me, being outside of what I'm good at, it's like me saying, well, I'm going to do a class on the menstrual cycle. It's like, well, hold on, why would you do that? You shouldn't be doing that. Or how to grow hair. Like, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do one on how to grow abs. I'd take your class. And so, finding that thing that you do effortlessly and really honing in on that, and then all of a sudden you build content around it. You're extremely authentic because it's congruent with who you are and what you're saying. And so now all of a sudden you're more comfortable in that stage environment, and you know that lane that you're in.
For somebody who's watching this and it's like, man, that's me, and they're recognizing it through this podcast, what would be the first steps?
In terms of finding your influence and realizing
finding your congruency to your brand, to your person.
Yeah. So I take a very different approach to it. And so when I use the word ethos, it comes from Aristotle. 2,000 years ago, he was the first person to talk about argumentative thought and persuasion. And he created what he calls his rhetorical triangle, the three-legged stool. It's ethos, pathos, and logos. So don't get too caught up in the name. It's actually in my book too. So like if you want to look at it, you can Google it.
Amplify your influence.
Yeah. And so ethos is your credibility. It's your character. It's who you are, right? So we've been talking about ethos, like for me, it's neuroscience. And I spoke 239 days last year. So I have an ethos and a credibility in speaking. I'm not a speaker that used to speak. I'm speaking all the time. And so what I'm doing is proven. And so it's, I don't have ethos around growing hair. I don't have ethos on the menstrual cycle. So I stay out of those lanes and I stay in mine. So one is figuring out what is your lane, right? Like what is that thing that you know that you do well? And some people say, well, I'm brand new and I don't have anything. Well, we all have a lane. And that lane, even if you're new, might be that you hustle. It might be that you bring a fresh perspective. It might be that you're resourceful, right? What is that thing that you do really, really well? You might be a fast learner. You might be somebody that just outworks everybody. I will do what you say, when you say, with no questions asked. Like those are all ethos things. So figuring out what it is. But now how you find it, I take a different approach. I ask the question of what makes you unique. And you and I went through this in the course.
Just done it.
Yeah. And so one of those pieces, let's play it. You want to do it right now?
Let's go.
So give me, if the first word, and if you're listening to this, you can do this exercise and you can do this multiple times. Give me one word that makes you unique.
Relentlessness.
Relentlessness. Okay, so now we take this word, and what's really fascinating, when people answer that question of what makes you unique, you can infer all sorts of things. One is you're proud of that, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Right. So if you're proud of that, I can also say, would you say that that's one of your core values?
Core values? In terms of my day-to-day?
One of your core values, the things you hold dear to you, that you are relentless.
Absolutely. I feel I am relentless in everything I do.
Right. And so then we go, okay, we just trace that back. We go, one, he's proud of it. Two, it's something that represents you, and it's one of your values. When I get to the values, now we bring the neuroscience in. And this is where it gets fun. We know that our core values, our values of who we are actually a biological process that's formulated between the ages of 9 and 13. So if you go relentless, that's not something that you said, well, last week I decided to become relentless. So now you've been that way basically your whole life, haven't you?
Absolutely.
And so we go, okay, if that core value was formulated in that really critical time period, I have two really critical questions. I want to know who was around and what happened, right? So let's start with that. And now that'll trigger one of two types of stories. Either a lighthouse story, what we call a lighthouse. Somebody was the beacon of light for relentlessness, and you wanted to be just like them. And you saw them, they were the guide, they were the perfect example, they were a lighthouse. What most of us have are foghorns, the opposite, somebody who wasn't relentless. And so we saw what life was like not being relentless. We saw the pain of it. Maybe we needed some relentlessness from them, and they didn't show it. And so we suffered. And so what's fascinating about the foghorn is that when we have those in our lives, most of us actually say, wow, I had darkness in this area of my life. I need to become the light. And we become what we never had. And so for you, who was it, ages 9 to 13, and were they a lighthouse or a foghorn?
Yeah. Oh, you asking me right now?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, we've done this in class, just for every.
Did we go with relentlessness?
We went with driven, loyalty. My goodness, I haven't got my notes in me.
But I don't think we did relentless. That's why I think it's kind of fun.
Let's
keep it organic.
Relentless, there was.
Who's the first person? And here's the best part, is that it doesn't have to be the exact or the one.
Yeah.
It's anything.
And also, just to add to, foghorn isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Not at all.
It again, it's somebody that just was either a lighthouse or a foghorn in that part of your life. And my father was relentless. He was, again, turn up at work, sick. He would be walking to work, rain or shine. Again, never missed a training session. Even if he worked 12-hour shifts, he was always there at my game, put the coach's hat on. He would go without sleep just to make sure that he ticked the box of work, brought bread to the table, and then he obviously was there as a dad. But as a kid, and this is kind of where we went into this, you don't really appreciate that much. You see your daddy's there. He worked. But now, as I'm older and I understand as a father myself, that word relentless is my father.
I love that. And so now, look at that. What's happening is he was there for you. You're observing this. Your brain is going, okay, there's a narrative here. There's a story. Dads always show up. They don't miss games. They work hard. They don't make excuses. Even if he's sick, he still goes in. That's how the brain processes all that. It turns it into a story. So our brain processes information through narrative. It turns that narrative into a way that you construct and view the world. Another way of saying that is the way you perceive the world. Another way of saying that is how you construct reality. And so you now are saying, I watched this. He was a lighthouse for me. It's a core value, and a core value becomes a filter by which you make decisions. And so now we go, okay, as you approach something and it becomes difficult, your core value kicks in, happens in this part of the brain called the limbic system that has 35,000 times more neurons. So it is one of the most powerful, when I say quantity of neurons moving towards something, happens in the limbic system. And if you don't believe me, okay, try to talk somebody out of their church. Doesn't work. Have a political conversation with somebody who doesn't believe what you believe. Mm-hmm. Talk somebody who's an Android user, get them to use Apple. It's all limbic, right? Yeah. It's all in that same part of the brain that our values are there. And so when you can trigger into that, you go, okay, I'm relentless. This was there. Look at how that's followed you through this whole career of becoming rugby player, deciding to come to a country that you didn't know anyone, and then became one of the greatest, if not the greatest, bodybuilder of all time. And so now you're in this transition, and you're saying, you know, when we first, well, I'm a bodybuilder. So you are so much more than that. You have the epitome of a champion, the mindset of a champion. And one of the things I was told you was like, I look at it like a football huddle. There's certain things that most people don't get access to. There's 11 players on that field per team. What would I give to be able to just sit there in the huddle and listen to Tom Brady talk to his team?
Yeah.
Not many people get that. That's what people want from you. And so when you talk about relentlessness, it's a whole different animal than when someone else does who hasn't been Mr. Olympia 7 consecutive times. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about unseen work, like one of my favorite things you said was, put your damn phone down and let's see what you really do that nobody sees. We can all pose for a picture. We can pretend to read a book. But how many reps and sets did you actually do? How far did you actually, with no one watching? There's that relentless nature that you come from. And when they hear that from you, all of a sudden, now that is part of your ethos. You can talk about that all day long. And it is effortless for you. It is, and it's so much more believable because we see it, so it's congruent, which is what our audience is always looking for. Unconsciously, they're saying, is this congruent? Meaning, I'm watching you, like for me, part of what my transformation was, is that I was way overweight. And being, 307 pounds, 45% body fat, talking about change and leadership, where I clearly can't even manage myself, I was losing ethos, credibility. And so I had to look at, now, even my content was good, I got a pass, but that pass was running out. And so when we talk about, if you're listening to this, he can talk about relentlessness because it comes, and imagine him starting with his father, like going back to, I remember watching my father, and that story becomes interesting, and we get a chance to know who you are, and then transitioning. Any business community, any business leader would love to talk to you about that because they want relentlessness for their teams.
Yeah. It's just learning how to tell your story that connects with the audience. And what you've been able to do working with me is, again, I've lived these stories through my own eyes, right? So many stories where I've kind of brushed off, or may have said something to you like, tell me that story, tell me that. And then it's become something. But because, again, it's in me and I've lived it, and it may be what I feel like, or not something that, may not be much.
Yeah.
It is. It's a massive part of my DNA. It's a massive part of a hurdle that I've gone through. And what I've started doing, and for all the viewers at home listening to this, I've got a notes that I've started compiling in my phone. And every time I have a moment where I was like, oh yeah, I put that note in my phone, and then I start deriving a story from that. And what I've been able to do since working with Rene is really tap into a lot of these suppressed memories, a lot of these things that I may have buried deep, put in the Pandora's box. And I've been able to now start thinking about, wow, that would make an impact. That would be able to be spoken about in a room and maybe change a perception of something. Again, another reason why I wanted to get into, keynote speaking was, I know I have a great story. I know I have a journey, but that was a chapter.
Yeah.
And now I'm on to newer chapters. And let's be honest, for the last 20 years, my whole life has been all encompassing one goal, one dream, one chase to be the best in the world. And now, humbly, I have to start pretty much from the beginning. I'm not at the beginning anymore because I've been working with you.
You're not at the beginning, even without me, you'll be great.
Well, I'm not without you, so you know what I mean. But nonetheless, I've had to truly go back to the classroom. I've had to.
But that's who you are.
Yeah,
You've always been a student.
I just like you said, I regard myself as a student of the game in bodybuilding. Always learning. You train with multiple different people around the world. Even if they're 20 years, you're junior, you're still learning. And I've been able to progress in my career tremendously by having an open mind, not knowing I know it all, even with titles and, 1 to 7. I've always allowed myself to be a coachable person. Obviously, I've had the same coach since, I was 19 years old, Neil Hill. And I work really well in that system. So when I wanted to get into this new world and become a good speaker, to become a great speaker, you've got to have, in my eyes, the best coach. And I now realize why you're regarded as one of the world's best is because truly you've been able to see the best version of me and really bring that out. And we've got, a long way to go because, again, even the best in the world have still got a long way to go.
It's the beauty of life.
But I've been able to see and listen and even envision myself on these stages. And as I said in bodybuilding, if you don't believe you can achieve something, then you're not going to achieve it at all. I truly believe that I will be speaking on big stages very soon. But again, I've got to put the work in.
One of my good friends, Seth Madison, he says the breakout rooms lead to the ballrooms. And it's such an important mentality to have that it's people. Somebody was saying, it's like, I went to an event, there was probably 3,000 people there, and he's like, Rene, thank you so much for speaking here. I said, thank me? I said, thank you. I go, you know how silly I look on that stage without you guys in the audience? And then he goes, oh, that's a good point. I said, this is teamwork, man. I go, you're giving me the opportunity. I need to bring value. And if one of us doesn't do that part, it just doesn't work. And so there's a beauty in understanding that relationship with the audience, and that you're on that stage to serve, because they have choice of attention. We can put anybody on that stage. We can put anybody, especially in today's where we have options of information everywhere in social media. With a thumb scroll, we can just do this. And so going up there from a place of, okay, this is a privilege, and I am here to express everything that I've learned. And if I don't put the work in, like our buddy LaShawn Merritt says, you'll get exposed. And so there's a beautiful connection there when you can keep that humility, but also power with that and understanding your role.
There's a story that I seen a couple of months ago that you sent me of Rene Rodriguez in a business meeting, and he was stammering and stuttering through this meeting. And it's very hard for me to see that guy and be like, wow, that was you. You truly have worked so hard to get to this point. But again, you started off knowing that you had a gift. You just had to hone the craft. And can you take us back to that video you showed me? I know it was a couple of years ago, but nonetheless,
we'll probably run some B-roll.
Yeah, we will. But it was a version of you that has truly put so many reps and sets in. A lot of people might be watching this. It's like, yeah, but just to add more context. Yeah, but he speaks so well. I don't have that gift, but nor did you.
No,
you truly worked so hard to hone this into something that now has become a teaching lesson for the world. Can you talk us back about that time?
Yeah. So I had massive, I still do actually, social anxiety. Like I don't like groups, and I don't, it's funny because, people say, but you speak in public. I say, yeah, but the stage is a very lonely place, and I get to control what's going on, so I get to talk about what I'm good at. And so there's a lot of safety in that. It's ironic, but it's the way it is. But a lot of massive insecurity I was a mumbler, so it was very hard to understand me. And that video was my first speaker training where I was getting coached, and I was on stage. I had hair, and it was a lot of ums and ahs and questioning, staring at the floor, not knowing where I was going, massive stress. It was the way most of us are on that. And to me, my relentlessness started way back in realizing that I wasn't the smartest, but what I had was work ethic. I knew that I could control that. I couldn't control all the other things, but I can control how hard I worked. And if I got up a little bit earlier, I went a little bit harder, I studied a little bit longer. And a part of it too is probably not even having a father. And so I would always be coachable from my friends' parents because I wanted someone to teach. Even if I knew what they were talking about, I pretend like I didn't so I could have that relationship. And even to this day, there's times where, even though I might think I know, I'm like, what if I don't? And there's a really beautiful interaction that can happen with that. But yeah, it was part of it was I was forced to do that. I was following in my mother's footsteps. She had been a consultant. She was an amazing speaker, still one of the greatest speakers I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And she, after 9/11, lost $1 million contract. I was working at the company. I was just a sales coordinator. And we had to fire 20 people. Actually, at the time, I had just become CEO and wasn't a speaker and was too young, too inexperienced, even though I'd been following for 5 years everything she'd been saying and writing notes and everything. Didn't have any belief in this was possible. It was also told by everybody in the company, nobody can do this but your mother. There's nobody that can do this. I mean, Rene, I've got 40 years experience. Your mother's special. She can't. Nobody can do this. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, nobody can do this.
The pressure.
But they didn't even want me speaking. But now we fired everybody. So it was me and my mother, a bookkeeper, and one other person. And so I'm like, okay, I know how to sell because selling was my background, and I sold cookware door to door in college. So I'm going to go sell her. And because of the loss of the business, she had 4 strokes. It was the stress that was her baby. My mother was a former nun, to give you an idea, a little backdrop. She was somebody that was about global peace and community, but was very gifted in creating change. And so this beautiful company she created was gone now. Stress came in. She had 4 strokes. Her ideas weren't the same. She wasn't as sharp as she used to be. So I would have to introduce her to the group. I would go put a group together, and then she would talk about things that didn't make sense to them because she'd assumed that they knew about the brain and all that stuff. And so I'm like, okay, I'll do the intro and I'll cover this first for 10 minutes or 5 minutes. I think the first one was 5 minutes. And then she would speak, and then she'd talk about new things. I'm like, oh, I'll incorporate that in the intro, and now it's 9 minutes. And then she'd talk about new things, then it was 15, then it was 20. Now I'm doing 45-minute intros. And people are like, well, why don't you just keep going? And it was one of those things where I had to learn. And then I went and got trained on storytelling and what influence really was. The guy, my coach, was trained by Dave Pemberton. Dave Pemberton, who is the person who taught Tony Robbins.
Oh.
And so in that realm of some of the great sort of the OG speakers, there was a way that we all spoke. And I can tell them, like the Les Browns and Zig Ziglars and Tom Hopkins and Wayne Dyer. There's this whole era of sort of the original Nightingale Conant speakers, and there was always a methodology to it. And so I got a chance to learn that, and then I took my behavioral neuroscience background and combined that with a sales background and working in change management, and it started sort of evolving into this process of me figuring it out for myself first, and then being asked, okay, can you show me how you do that? And then sort of evolving into it.
How long did that process take?
Well, that video was 2005. 2005. I started this whole process, 1994 is when I really started. And in sort of selling cookware and being in personal development and learning about how the brain works and putting it into practice. And then, but I wasn't really speaking until 2000, 4 or 5. And then my first big stage was 2007. That was me, Jeffrey Gitomer, Ben Stein, remember from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and Lou Holtz. And I came out of that #1 rated speaker there.
Wow. When did you feel like, okay, this is my world?
How would you define my world?
Well, meaning kind of bodybuilding was my world.
Yeah.
When I first stepped on stage, and sorry, not to give you more clarity, but when I first stepped on stage and I was like, wow, I've got the bodybuilding bug. Obviously, had it not been for Neil Hill chasing me down straight away after the show and saying, hey, you need to do the British Nationals, who knows what happened, but we all know the story. Was it a defining moment for you where you had that?
There was.
This is my world.
17 years old. I was, my mom asked me to come watch her speak. And it was at, she was doing a creativity and business workshop. There's 3 keynote speakers. There's probably about 500 people in there. And I remember going there, kind of going with my mom. I don't even know what she does, right? And this first guy goes on stage. His name was Bill Shepard. And he was charismatic. He was funny. He was smart. I loved what he was talking about. And I was like, oh my God. I nudged my mom. I'm like, that's what I want to do. I want to do what this guy's doing. Whatever he's doing. I mean, he was funny. He was so articulate. He was so confident. People were listening. He had everything that I didn't have. He knew how to capture attention. People liked, it was just literally everything that I didn't know how to do. And that I had no influence. I was a jock, so I played basketball, but I was quiet and insecure. And this guy had everything. And she looked at me, she goes, really? She goes, well, I'm up next. I'm like, oh man, you're going to follow this guy? My mom? You're going to get destroyed. I was embarrassed. I didn't want to be there.
At this point in time, you didn't know your mom spoke
didn't know.
At the magnitude she did.
No idea.
Wow.
No clue. And there was a break. I go out and get like a soda or something like that. I come back and I came in 30 seconds and I hear her singing. And I'm like, oh my God, did she pull out her guitar? How embarrassing is this, right? And she's got 500 business executives singing along with her. Now, my mother was a nun on the border of Haiti, harassed by the Ku Klux Klan, the KGB, and she used to use music as a way to bring people together. And she brought it to the boardroom, and they're singing, and I'm looking around going, they're buying into this shit? And then I'm like, they're loving this. And then she sits down, and they start talking, and I get emotional because she was so good, and she was so clear, and it was like almost magic. And I'm watching this, and I'm 17, and I'm just like, I start like getting teary-eyed, crying, like not visibly. But I'm like, this is my mom. Mm-hmm. An hour earlier, I figured out that's what I wanted to do, and I have the best person as my mom. And it was in that moment, I'm like, I know I have to go this path somehow.
And you followed her around everywhere?
Everywhere. I wrote down everything she said. When you're talking about like everything she said.
Wow.
5 years.
And you developed your own style through your background, incorporating your schooling to the world of obviously keynote speaking. And your mum, obviously, during that time, you had so many great speaking, as you mentioned, but she had such a unique style.
Very.
What separated her from the rest of the pack?
One of it was based on things that actually worked. So a lot of keynote speakers are great actors, right? They're performance experts, and they nail that speech, and it's so compelling, it's believable, it's emotional, it's inspiring. I mean, it's fulfilling. But with the whole statement is that it wears off a couple hours later. If not the next day, you go back to normal. So there's no real change. Mm. My mother lived in 5 countries before the age of 25. Cuba before and after the Cuban Revolution, Germany after the Holocaust, Panama during the Panama Canal crisis, the border of Haiti as a nun with the guerrilla warfare, and in Vegas during the A-bomb testing. And so her life before 25 was very affected by change.
Jeez.
The promise of it and the reality of it. The promise was revolution. The reality was a lot of people died. Looking at leveled cities in Germany after the war and saying, so she was driven by all these questions, like, how can we create change that lasts, truly lasts, not this stuff that comes and it goes. Secondly, how do you do it without creating dead bodies, right? And the proverbial dead body, because people aren't dying in corporate America, but people can feel like they've been trampled over. The change happens, and like they weren't even considered, people losing jobs, moving around, and that's why change was such a difficult, and still continues to be such a difficult thing. So it was all these questions that drove her, and she had a track record of success for creating change where nobody could. And so when A keynote speaker can come in for an hour, put on a fantastic show, and leave and not be held accountable to the result. When you're a consultant and you're given a group of people that have to transform, you're held accountable to the beginning and to the end and to the result. And so there's a very different world. And when you can combine those two pieces, which is what I started off doing that work before I was a keynote speaker. So I was 10 years plus into creating change in real business. It wasn't theoretical. There was nobody paid for theory. You had to, this group was hostile. They weren't getting along. They're losing $6 million a month. We changed that. The unions weren't getting along. We could change that in 24 hours. And so it was true. It was proven. And then you bring those ideas to stage, and then you have a neuroscience twist. And my background is really focused on the applied science. I love the research, but I was always too like, what does that have to, how do I use that to sell more? How do I use that in good communication? What does that mean to this? And I would ask these questions that were applied, application driven. And so when you bring that to the stage, before it was cool, because now it's cool. But 30 years ago, like the brain, human emotion wasn't even talked about. My dissertation in college was on human emotion. It was so hard to find any research because we knew so little. And now it's everything.
Yeah.
Probably too much now. Yeah. Whole nother conversation on that one.
Along with aliens.
Oh, God. Yeah. I'll go there. Let's go
I
there.
know.
But, no, but it's, I spent most of my time getting grown men typically to understand how to deal with human emotion, how to bring it to the workplace. Now it's almost opposite. We're trying to say, okay, it's a little bit too much. Let's back it off a little bit. But yeah, it's a crazy long journey.
Can you talk about what kind of things you done back then to bring the best version out to some of these guys?
So the first thing when you're talking about group change, like it amplifies an individual journey. But a lot of what we started with was how do you take groups to do that? The first thing is what you mentioned in the intro, is how do I create a safe space? So what does that mean? What we're creating technically is what we call psychological safety. And so go back to the primitive parts of our brain that's designed to keep us alive. Number one task of the brain, survive. Second is make sense of the world. So if I can't make sense of the world if I don't feel safe, because I don't even care about sense, logic. I care about my survival. So when you get in an argument with somebody, there's a part of your brain that takes over that throws logic out the window. And so it's the same thing that keeps us alive, protects us. So then you look at what triggers that part of the brain. Well, that part of the brain is very primitive and ancient. And it's triggered by lions, tigers, bears, sharks, threats, somebody fighting you, the fear of your life. And so that's governed by the autonomic nervous system, your breathing, your heart rate, your digestion. So if any of those things that keep you alive is threatened, there's a whole chain link of events that happens to trigger you to put you in a fight, flight, or freeze mode. Mm-hmm. All of that happens up to 7 seconds before you're consciously aware of it. It's the reason, like, we're having this conversation, but if somebody were to throw a ball at me, I would flinch and try to move because there's part of my brain that's watching all of this stuff as you and I are having this conversation. It's pretty wild when you think about how many parts of the brain are functioning unconsciously. Mm-hmm. And thank God, right? Because it keeps us alive. And so now, what triggers a lot of that fight, flight, freeze mode, or the general adaptation syndrome, is stress. So the brain doesn't know what a shark is. The brain knows that the shark is really stressful, a lot of cortisol to the level of maybe say 1 to 10. 10 equals death. So the brain says, that's a level 10 stress. Move away from that. Fight, flight, run for your life, fight for your life, or stand still. And so we go, okay, so if stress is the component, well, what other things cause stress? How about public speaking? Now, you're not going to die, but you perceive it as a level 10 stress. So you respond as if you're going to die. And criticism. If you feel like you're in a meeting and people are criticizing what you're saying, they don't care what you're doing, your brain won't be fully active. You'll be in that protective mode. Creativity goes out the window, so does innovation. And so as leaders, we said, okay, the first step is we got to create safety, structure, order, predictability. Create safety in the relationship. Well, back in the day, leaders, and still to this day, but it was less now, leaders were command and control, do as I say because you work here. Well, it doesn't work anymore that way. I mean, leaders have had to evolve to say, hold on a second, I need to inspire you now. Before it was, you work here, I pay your bills, do what I say. It doesn't work like that anymore. And so any learning environment, the first thing is psychological safety. If you're a salesperson listening to this, sales resistance is they don't feel safe. I have money, you want my money, you're going to persuade me, and trick me into giving it to you. Well, if you can create safety, guard comes down, we have a conversation, and ideas are allowed in. And so we had to create safety. Now, how do you do that in a hostile work environment with unions and 80% African-American black paper mill, but the union is 100% white KKK? That's where we cut our teeth. And so I had to create safety within 24 hours, actually 8 hours, but one day to the next. And usually within the first 2 to 3 hours on how do you get people to actually get along. And when you create psychological safety, racial issues go away, political challenges go away, and people have human conversations and human interactions. And so we had to create that kind of environment. So when I created Amplify, we knew the first thing, if I'm going to be that hard on you and that intense, I have to earn that by creating rapport and safety first.
Mm-hmm. How long did it take you to put this, put all your learnings from everything you had from your mum, your background in neuroscience, to create this, create Amplify?
My first one was 2011, and it's changing every time we do it. I mean, last year we're doing 3 to 5 a month and selling them out at $6,000 per person. And so you learn so much, and hearing thousands of stories, and thousands. And watching people tell the story, you realize what works and what doesn't work. You realize its role in branding. You realize its work on social media. You realize how it affects relationships and children and how they grow up. The impact is so much further than business, which, you know me well, and you know me already, that my purpose goes far beyond business.
Absolutely.
It's helping somebody truly understand why they're here, and then helping leaders truly tap into their full potential of influence and leadership. And so I feel like when you say how long it takes, I feel like I'm still learning, man.
Yeah. Even, last mastermind that we done, there's a new topic that's come up, social media. Again, that's the evolution, right, since when you started.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of people know that I fought hard on social media, even with yourself. There was not a component of social media in the learning, but now you realize that this is something we cannot ignore even more. We done a whole, probably like a half a day on social media, along with ChatGPT, integrating into my life. What I realized, obviously I have my social media presence, but we all had, if I can speak about
Please.
The actual event, so many walks of life, so many people of high success, all in that room, egos left at the door, all there to learn. We all had to choose our bucket where we wanted to kind of excel more at. And I guess, you even thought yourself, like, social media was something that I think it was the most requested thing. Yeah. How do I speak in front of a camera? How do I? Yeah. And that course truly gives so many people empowerment. And you heard it, first of all, it's like, yeah, I don't know what to say. I don't think I've got a story. And you just break it down. It's like, tell me about this. Goes back to the foghorn lighthouse. And then people you see these light bulbs going off. Whether it's with that person you're having the conversation, but everybody in the room is like, oh man, I'm taking this note down. Social media now is our kind of roller index. It's our yellow pages. It's our, it's to coin our friend Amir, it's business media. Yeah. Right? It's our face to the world, how we want to be seen, perceived. But again, without losing your ethos. Mm-hmm. And what everybody in that room realized that day, me looking around, was everybody has their ethos. Yep. You just don't know how to put it together, but we all did that day. Even me, who've been on social media and got all these followers, I'm still trying to find my version, and that's what we done actually a couple of hours ago on my whiteboard, is trying to discover, who am I? Who is Flex Lewis? What do I stand for? What do I represent? And what is my ethos? And social media has truly taken off tenfold, where now everybody's got their phone in their hands. To your point, everybody's scrolling. Yeah. But what makes people stop on your page that makes you stand out from the rest of the pack? And it's incredible what we learned that day. Again, can you just break down that lesson?
Yeah. Well, I think the thing, and you said so many good things there, and shout out to Amir where he said, there's ways to look at social media. And let me back up even my relationship with it. I hated social media, and parts of me still does, right? There's a lot of things that just, it was hard. I was 12 years into trying to create videos and putting stuff out there. Nobody would watch. I couldn't get past a couple thousand followers, 20, 30, 100 views. And it was like, I'm like, but this content is great in my own head, And my clients would say, Rene, you're going to kill it. I'm like, nobody watches. I'm like, well, maybe I need better production. So I go and spend $10,000 on a video, 48 likes. Okay, well, $20,000. I mean, this is the video, right? And nobody would watch it. And I finally gave up. And I'm like, I go, social media is not for me. And I got on this sort of high horse. And I was like, social media is for fast food content. It's simple sugar for the brain. It's a cliche. And I go, true change requires you to actually pay attention for longer than a minute. And so I had this sort of like, I hated it. And somebody said to me, and they said, Rene, it's because you're doing it wrong. And I'm like, what do you mean? I said, well, you have to understand that you're teaching people how to speak to captive audiences. I go, what do you mean? I said, well, they can't scroll a live audience, right? I can't scroll you. I'm sitting in a chair physically. You're there. The only thing I can do is stand up and leave, but I work here, so I have to listen to you. So you can start with story. You can build. If somebody goes to watch a movie, it might be a 2-hour movie, they're not going to give you the end right away. They're going to lead you to that. You didn't know that Rocky was going to win the championship until the final scene, and that whole story was built. And so there's a methodology. It's the hero's journey, the rise and fall of the hero. And so I tried taking that same approach for social media. It doesn't work. Imagine starting hi, I remember when I was a kid, when my father, scroll.
Yeah.
And you had to realize that we are very selfish consumers of content. And I used to get mad at people for being selfish consumers as I was scrolling, being selfish. Every time we scroll, we're saying, that was dumb. That was dumb. Nothing for me. Nope, that didn't catch my attention. Nothing. None of us go into social media and saying, well, what is this person with poor video and horrible storytelling skills trying to say? I mean, look past all that and really give them a chance. No, I have another option. I can just do this swipe thing and something new appears. And so what we had to realize was you had a 3-second audition for attention. So how do I capture attention? Now, this whole concept of the hook is not new. People are saying, oh, this is new. It's not new. This is headline writing that newspaper articles have been doing since the beginning of print. And we say, how do you stop the scroll? Well, back then they had to stop the stroll. As people strolled by the magazine articles or the newspaper stands, what made them stop and go, oh, wait a minute, what's that? We've always been in this process of trying to capture attention. It's just new ways. And so the one thing that we also had to do was saying, okay, these are, a lot of these people are very successful business people. And didn't you find it fascinating too when we said, okay, we had people put themselves in buckets. Are you here for growing business performance, meaning more revenue, or you want to learn social media? Well, the people that were very good at business revenue were very poor in social media.
Incredible.
Right? And the people that were great in social media needed help in growing revenue.
It's like yin to yang.
And what's funny is that you watch these people that are like, they're making millions. Like, I need to figure out social media. I'm like, you really don't. But if you did, you'd be exponential. And a lot of the people that are great on social are starving behind the scenes, renting most of their lives. And or they might get a bunch of views, but they don't understand the business side of it. And so merging those together is a really fascinating piece where those that were good at business were starving, and we're chomping at the bit to help those in social media. And those in social media were wanting to help those. It was a beautiful mix. So, but now we go, okay, let's work with somebody that doesn't know how to and where their place is on social. What that means is they don't know their ethos. And so what ends up, they watch what works for other people and they try to copy that. And it can feel very uncomfortable. It can feel very out of place. Like, I don't do dance videos. And so for me, I'm like,
you're a good dancer though, I've seen you.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm Cuban, so I mean,
yeah, okay.
Yes, I can.
All in the hips.
Yeah, I can dance. But so I was watching these things that work for others. I'm like, I'm not going to do a dance video. I'm not going to do these stupid humor things. It's just not me. I'm funny, but maybe I'm not funny. I like laughing and joking, but that's just not, it's not my ethos. And it would feel very awkward for me to do that. And so for me, I had to figure out, how do I become myself and do that? And so many people follow a trend, But I looked at it from saying, okay, hold on a second. Instagram and TikTok, they want people to watch videos. It helps their platform. So what they're looking for is saying, hey, can you just be yourself? And then we'll go find the people for you. Instead of you're trying to be all these other people that other people are following, and you're just not good at it. So we're not going to put anybody in front of you. But if you're really good at being yourself, we'll find people. Look at the people that you ever watch, like get caught in a doom scrolling, and you watch somebody doing their job. Like there's a camera of this guy that works at a diner, and he's just making eggs and hash browns. And he's so fast at how he's doing it. And it's just what he does. And he's good. And I can just sit and watch. I'm like, man, how does he do that? There's a thing. I watch this guy make fried rice. He does it at the same time, but he's so good at it. And it's just what he does. He's not trying to give lessons. He's not trying to do dance. He's just making his craft, fried rice. And I love it. And so if you just put out there what you're good at, the algorithm will find people for you. But what most of us don't know is, what is our ethos? What are we good at? What is my lane that I want to occupy? So it begins with that. And so what we did with you, even just, again, that next level of it, when I built my brand, I had to go out and find a copywriter to help me figure out my ethos. What did I believe? What was my thing? And so when you figure that out, that what makes you a unique question, and you work it backwards to the lighthouse, that's one really fast way of figuring out what you do. And now we did it with one word. What if you did it with 5? And then you go, okay, you got relentlessness, focus, discipline, right? What was the other ones? We had driven, and fun, and jovial, right? Some really cool things. All of topics that you could easily speak to. All topics that you could write a blog post on. We did it earlier. I wanted to prove it to you. I said, let's just have a conversation. But you're a prep guy. You prepare everything. I mean, the notes from your last podcast, you had that thick of notes in cards. I go, we're not going to prep anything, because your last 40 years have been your prep within your ethos.
And by the way, that's what you told me about this podcast too. You were like, nope, we're going to go on. We're going to talk as friends. We have a lot of stuff going on. So this is all reps and sets, being comfortable in the uncomfortable. And to your point, I'm always prepped. I've always got notes. I'm always shuffling through my cards. And this is kind of unique, and I don't feel the stress that I normally do in another show. Granted, I have a phenomenal speaking guest that is doing the show for me, but nonetheless, I think I've taken a little bit of anxiety off the table by not having to overly prepare.
Well, think about what you've done. Your job was perfection. Every muscle group, every striation, how much conditioning, what fat was there, and then strip all the clothes, and we're going to analyze this on a group of professional judges that it can see everything, and we're going to put you against the best in the world. So your job was to be perfect for that short window of time, a few hours a day of time. And so, but now in social media and in public speaking, it isn't about perfection, because nobody connects to perfect. Your job wasn't to connect with the audience. Your job was to look perfect. But what I think made you special was who you were off stage. I mean, if anybody who knows you, anybody knows Flex, you can't go anywhere without people knowing you. And you stop and you give 100% of your attention to that person. And you've done that your entire career. And that's why you still are beloved by so many. That is what I think makes you unique. And so, but you still approach speaking from that, I need to be perfect. And now it's saying, okay, hold on a second. What if it's not about perfect? What if perfect now means authentic, full of errors, blemishes, mistakes? That's a totally different world for you.
That's a whole different world for me.
Yeah.
And you're truly you're telling me to embrace this. It's okay not to be perfect. And, when we go back to that story of you starting off and to see where you're at right now and all the hundreds of stages you speak at every single year, it truly is, something that I now need to embrace daily, and not just on the speaking stage, not just on the podcast, just being who I am off camera when the camera is not on me. Because something happens, and there's a lot of viewers who probably will relate to this. As soon as the camera comes on, I have to...
Well, we both did. How many times did we fix our shirts?
Right?
I had him raise the camera so I look skinnier. I mean, it's like there's all these things that are going on. But here's the thing. All the things that I'm saying are way easier said than done.
Yeah.
And so I want to honor those that feel that fear, because Think about it. You were saying, hey, just be yourself. You know what we're saying? Be yourself. And they're going, well, what if they don't like me? That's scary. Well, I want to be likable. We all want to be likable. I want to be impressive on the show. Who wouldn't be? Who wouldn't want to be good? You don't want to go on a podcast and bomb. And so there's this natural built-in pressure to impress your audience. And so part of the discipline and the training is to let go of the need to impress and focus on expressing what you believe and who you are. And you start, it's scary, but if you go, okay, so then let's dive deeper into this.
Absolutely, yeah.
So then how do I get to express? Well, one is I've got to change my relationship and my frame of reference and how I view this. My job on stage isn't to impress. My job on stage is to serve. So, okay, that's a different mentality. Right? There's a different mindset to that one. So if I'm there to serve, then two, the realization that I've been asked to do this. So they must have seen value somewhere. And so then I have to learn to not listen to that little voice. So I learned a long time ago that voice lies to me. It lied to me my whole life. Damn it. And if I know that it lies, I'm like, hey, I know you're going to tell me I don't. And even today, I'm like, what do I know? Like every day, it's like imposter syndrome always creeps up. Everybody has it. So you're not special for having it. I'm not special for having it. It just happens. It is part of the human condition to question. And it's an integrity. Am I qualified to do this? How many people don't have that little radar and just give advice and directions in cities they've never been? You know, what's that my favorite meme that says, Lord, give me the courage of the 25-year-old life coach. You know, it's like
so much confidence.
So much. It's wrong. I mean, I believe it. Like, you know, somebody says, well, hey, I'm confident I can do a heart surgery on you. I don't care how confident you are, Rene. You're not touching me unless you've been trained and have experience. So point being, it's being yourself isn't as easy as it sounds, but it's the worthwhile journey to get on. And, you know, like even today, you're like you know, with Roderick, we were like going through and we did our first thing with no prep, and we're like, hey, step one, you did 5 reels and you wouldn't allow them to post them. I looked at them, these are great. Are they what they can be? They can be so much better, but this is great. Get it out there, because you can't bypass the learning curve. And it's really well done. And the more reps and sets, the more comfortable you'll get. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things that the unseen is all the mistakes, all the criticism. And by the way, I'm also a recovering perfectionist. Recovering. I'm still there. It's so stupid. And Gary Vee says something that I hate it. I hated it when he said it, and I fought it, but it makes sense. He goes, perfectionism is another way of saying you're just scared and insecure. All right, you got me there. And so, but you know, what's interesting though, is that the fear and the insecurity also can become a really strong driver to push and work hard. I work hard because I don't want to sound stupid. I listen and I study because I want to be able to answer this question. So there's a beauty in that as well. When it controls us is when it goes out of hand.
A lot of people suffer with anxiety, myself included. It's probably one of my biggest battles. You know, doubt and more so gets overshadowed by anxiety many times, overthinking, even in this case now we just spoke about. What kind of strategies could you give the viewers to overcome, you know, anxiety, just in general life? Because we're not just, I'm gonna cover like a vast base here of, obviously we've talked about stage and stuff, but across the board, what strategies?
Well, the first thing that helped me is understanding that stress is physical, that anxiety is physical. Now, once I know that it's physical, it's tangible, right? Because before, stress can feel like sort of this this intangible thing that comes over me and I don't know how to control it. Well, stress is physical. There's a biological, physiological, and neurological process that takes place that creates it. And so let's just break it down really simply. There are 2 nervous systems, part of the autonomic nervous system, central nervous system, called the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. They're antagonistic, which means they cannot be functioning at the same time. It's either sympathetic or it's parasympathetic. They're one or the other. Lights on, lights off. So sympathetic is the excitatory response. It's the stress response. You want that when you're running from something. It's the fight, flight, freeze response happens in that sympathetic nervous system. The other is the parasympathetic nervous system, the relaxed response, where we want to get to for this, right? We want to get to a parasympathetic place. You're comfortable. Like what we're looking at creating in here for your guests is the most comfortable, relaxed place, so that they come in and they just themselves. You know, you even said some of your guests, they sit in the chair and they're like, you know, that's a sympathetic nervous response. So then you go, okay, if my goal, when I feel stressed, I can go, okay, this is a sympathetic nervous system response. How do I trigger parasympathetic? You can't go, oh, trigger it. Doesn't work that way. You have to do parasympathetic things. One of them is breathing. And so think about every professional athlete that we know, every actor, every elite performer, every Navy SEAL. The number one conversation I have when I get to work with them, train with them, learn with whatever it is breathing. It's biology. Austin Eckler, one of the greatest running backs in the NFL right now. What do you think we talk about? He's like, well, there are people faster and stronger than me. I perform under pressure better than they do because he manages his biology. The stress doesn't go overboard and take over. And so breathing is that secret weapon of the high performer, the elite. Sadly, it's the punchline of the underperformer. What I mean by that is, you ever see somebody make a joke about breathing and meditation and mindfulness? I said, well, the moment they make a joke about that, I know they've never faced 3,000 eyeballs looking at them, expecting them to entertain them. They've never faced a game-winning shot. They've never been on a stage where everyone's going, show us what you got. But you look at Kobe Bryant, LeBron, Jordan, basketball is obviously one thing. Every fighter that we know, they're not there hyping themselves up. They're there relaxed. LaShawn Merritt, one of the fastest men on the planet, 3 gold medalists, he's breathing. You look at Usain Bolt before he's running, he's just relaxed. That's all very parasympathetic. And so there's this place where we go, okay, how do you align your brain to work and to get into that flow? It is all biology, and it is all triggered for the thing we can control, which is breathing.
So breathing is something that you should really start investing into.
Absolutely.
And there's so much now, especially with the internet, right? That you can gather so much information from. But what kind of breathing techniques would you give, or would you advise somebody that just has terrible anxiety that's truly taken over their life?
For sure. And if you want, I can put a link in the bio.
Absolutely.
There's a guided relaxation process called progressive relaxation that we use, and it's a way I'll guide you. It's 4.5 minutes, and you basically tense and tighten different parts of your body. The powerful thing about progressive relaxation is that it teaches you the mind-body connection, meaning I feel stress. Oh, I feel it in my shoulders, or I feel it in my jaw. I feel it in my fists, or it's in my butt cheeks, or just clenched. Whatever it is, you start building that connection, and then you can tense it up even further, and then consciously let it go, and you realize that you can actually control it. You do that 3 times, and you can choose just one body part, relax, and you enter that state. So we'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
The other is there's different levels to it. Like Navy SEALs are famous for making box breathing, very famous. 4 seconds in, hold 4 seconds, 4 seconds out, hold 4 seconds. They do that as they're in the middle of a battle, and that keeps their brain in system 2, which would be the parasympathetic, while their enemies are in system 1 in panic. They don't function the same. They don't do that. They train under stress, and they do that. Box breathing takes some time and practice. My favorite way to start is diaphragmatic breathing, a very simple Mayo Clinic method of 3 seconds in, 4 seconds out. So you go, and then 4, right? And you practice that, and you really have to time that. The key is to get more seconds breathing out than you breathe in. If you breathe out too fast, like if you breathe in, let's say you go 4 in, 3 out, that's hyperventilation. And so you want to make sure that your breath out is longer. You hold the oxygen longer. So 3 in, 4 out. What you graduate, like my favorite for breathing is a big deep breath in, and then 7 to 8 seconds out. Andrew Huberman talks a lot about 2 quick breaths into the nose. So 1 deep breath into the nose, and then another one at the end, and then out. Right? That's one of the quickest ways to get parasympathetic.
Which we done in the last Mastermind.
Yeah. And if you do that right, you go, and then you feel this coolness immediately go through your body. And so practice that. But the thing is try them out and learn what works best for you. I can't do that 2 second. If I'm about to go on stage, I can't go, you'd look stupid. But I can breathe in deeply and slowly exhale as I'm talking to somebody. I can do it on stage. I can do it as I'm being introduced. And so breathing is that thing that really helps. And here's the thing. It's the last thing you want to do when you're highly stressed. Your body is running in that direction and you're trying to say, let's go this direction. And so it takes practice. It takes discipline. And don't wait till you're stressed to start practicing. Practice now when you're relaxed. Get into that place. Remind yourself that you can do this. Look for the quick wins and remember that the anxiety isn't reality, even though it's so compelling in the moment. It's so this is going to last forever. No, it won't. Things come and things go. And can you make it through that moment? Can you be through in those moments where it feel like it's forever, it's pervasive? It's not. It's temporary. And you begin the mindset narrative to say, okay, hold on a second. I can control more of this than I realized. And yes, it's going to be hard. And then make sure that someone around you can be there to remind you, hold on, hey, let's breathe and be open to it.
Tyus has a couple of questions for you, Rene.
Please.
Yeah, so I've got a modern question and I've got an ancient question. Which
Love
would
it.
you prefer?
You surprised me.
Okay, all right. So you talked about congruence and being consistent and aligned. And in today's day and age, we're dealing with more and more people that don't trust the media, don't trust politicians. We just don't trust faces of authority, even though they've made their living off of being congruent. And so how do you reach a real level of congruence when even the most congruent among us are no longer trusted by society?
It's a phenomenal question. So I think if I'm hearing you, how do I build trust in a distrusting world? Is that kind of what you're saying, right? Especially with the media was supposed to be our trusted source, and then, I look at the channel by which, right, we're communicating. Somebody once asked me, so Rene, why aren't you more vocal around politics and or maybe even racist, just issues? And I said, what? I don't think that whole medium is immediately a very distrusted medium, and it's not a very bonding one. And so, for me, choosing the right avenue of communication. Like, I'll give you an example. So George Floyd, when that happened 15 minutes from where I live. And everybody said, Rene, why aren't you more vocal? You're Rodriguez. You should be talking about the community. And I said, what do you mean? How do you know I'm not vocal? Well, I haven't seen you post on social media. I said, well, when was the last time you read something that was opposing to what you believed and you go, wow, I never thought about it that way? Social media is a very divisive process. Most people get on there, they rant and they scream. And all it does is it calls people who already believe what you believe to come to your rescue. And it pushes away people that don't believe what you believe. And so you did nothing. It takes no skill to do that. I go, I have been vocal, but I've been doing it one-on-one. I have been going to powerful executives, people that are leaders, people with budgets, people that have influence. And I've been one-on-one conversations. And I can't tell you, probably 80-some conversations I had that week. Very emotional week for me. And people saying, Rene, I want to help, but I don't know how. And when I try, people just bite my head off. These are white men, by the way. And one of the things I said was very controversial. I said, during that time, one of the most important voices was white men. They were like, what are you talking about? I said, well, they have influence. They can hire people. They have budgets. I go, aren't you looking for allies in this moment? And I can't tell you how many people, when a white man with power would say, hey, what do we do? It's because of you guys. And they're like, oh. And then they go, well, maybe I should just be quiet and listen. And I'm like, you realize you just bit the head off of the person that could probably help you in this moment? Not saying the only one, but how about let's take a different approach? Why would you put them in a fight, flight, freeze mode? Why would you trigger that out of them? And I get it, where you're angry, and I get it, all that stuff's happening. But to me, maybe a one-on-one conversation might be the best one. And there was a group of my friends that wanted to get together and have a discussion and put it on social media. And I'm like, and they wanted me to lead it. And I was like, no thanks. And they were upset. I'm like, I go, here's the thing. That to me isn't the most effective methodology based on what he said, which is it's a very distrusted means. And so I had to look at what are the trusted and distrusted means and make sure that I'm not guilty by association of that. Did I answer that question?
Yeah, I think you did.
Sounded good anyway.
Answer, but it's a hard problem too.
I agree.
Yeah.
Very hard one.
Yeah.
But great question.
Tyus, what was the other one?
The other one's more on the ancient side of stuff. So
Tyus loves this, by the way.
On multiple occasions, you guys have brought up the Aristotelian triad or the rhetorical triangle or whatever you want to call it. We've talked about, if my Greek is correct, ethos, which is ethics, pathos, which is emotion, logos, which is logic, and to a smaller extent, kairos, which is, I believe, timing. And
telos was the fifth one.
What was the fifth one?
Telos.
What is telos?
Greek literal word for end, the purpose. Kairos. Kairos would be the timeliness of the era.
Haven't you read his book, Tyus?
I have not read his book. I just study Greek.
Oh my gosh!
I'm surprised you knew Kairos. Nobody knows Kairos.
Oh, listen, this guy is
super impressive.
Yeah, Tyus needs to have a camera and be more present. I'm very lucky that I've got him to be on the mic.
If you guys saw what I look like, I'm like a burn victim. You don't want me on camera.
Oh my gosh!
What's he talking about?
So my question.
The question.
He's the best looking guy in the room.
Yeah, thank you.
Look at me.
That's why we can't put a camera on me. I don't want to put you out of shame. So my question regarding that is, Aristotle argued that the primary three are the ones that motivate an audience, that create a compelling argument. However, he also argued that they don't work equally for each audience.
Agreed.
And so my question is, based off of the different cultures, the different demographics you might be in front of, how do you dynamically change your presentation between being ethical, emotional, logical, for a dynamically changing audience?
Store my question, Tyus.
Sorry about that.
We're going to have him write all these questions. These are great.
Yeah.
So
that was my question, by the way.
Thank you, Flex, via Tyus. So one, you're 100% right. Back then, Aristotle thought his favorite was logos, logic, and he felt that was the most compelling. And you go back to even when cameras weren't around. What did they say? Video killed what? The radio star.
Yeah.
Right. And what that means is that now we took a visual approach to things. It moved. Before we just listened to the talent, to the voice, Milli Vanilli, right? Let's look at that piece. And Shaka Khan. And so these singers that were just incredibly talented. But then video comes out, we go, oh, but Britney Spears is so much better looking at the time. And so then now the visual aesthetic started to take over. And so back in the day, this ethos, pathos, logos, this rhetorical triangle was in a written form. And so there was, how do you create an argument? And today we would call the business case, right? And so logic was there. But now ask ourselves in the time we're at, how much does logic play into our decisions? And like, look at social media where so much emphasis is put on the ethos. People rent the fake cars and they buy all these things. So they perceived to the visual ethos, well, if they can afford those cars, they must be smart. And they're drawing into aspirational appeal, which is, appeals to the insecure. Like for example, 6-minute abs. Like, would you ever buy 6-minute abs?
Oh, I'd buy 7, but not 6.
Yeah, right.
No, it's not gonna fly.
Because that doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. But if I have an insecurity about my ability to put the work in, I'm like, oh wait, hold on a second. I can do 6 minutes. So aspirational appeal appeals to the insecure about doing the actual work. 30 days to financial freedom. You can't be financially free in 30 days. It's a little bit longer than that and a lot more to it. And so to answer his question, you go, okay, so you look at ethos, credibility, your ethic, all of those things. There's so many cool things about the word ethos when you get into the word. And then pathos is the emotional appeal. So let's work all three for a minute. Doctor has ethos, right? Doctor says, hey, Flex, you're getting fat, you need to lose weight. Right? You'd probably say, okay, doc, I'll start next week, because they didn't have any pathos. Pathos is the emotional appeal, which usually drives behavior. So there wasn't there. So doctors have a lot of ethos, but not much pathos. So then we go, okay, so now what's logos? Would be the logical appeal. Think of how many logical things we know. $2 trillion budget in healthcare. 80% of that budget is made up by 5 behavioral issues that we all know. Eating, drinking, smoking, not enough exercise, and too much stress. Yet still we do it. We don't have a logical problem. We know it. We have a behavioral issue. And usually that's around pathos. And so to answer the question, if I'm dealing with a group of engineers, probably going to have to up my logic on this one and maybe not be as storytelling. But if I'm training, because I work with a lot of engineers, I'm talking about MIT level, Harvard, Yale, some of the best engineers in the world, they're way too heavy on logic and they're losing their audience, which is why they're boring and no one's listening to them. You have some of the most brilliant minds in the world, but an idea that goes on deaf ears because they just get too technical. And so we have to up their pathos, which is probably uncomfortable for them. And so then you look at a group that is overly passionate and they lack the logos. We have to work on that piece of it. Or if let's say I'm doing it with a group of kids, I'm probably going to be focused on some of the others. And so part of the process that we teach is first, who's your audience? And
What if you don't know? What if you walk into the room and you have to change dynamically? Is that possible?
Yes. Well, one of the things for that, and God, I love these questions. The first step in this is listening, pay attention. So people say, well, how did you prepare for this? I'm like, a lot of times I get, Rene, what are you going to talk about today or tomorrow morning? I'm like, I'm not sure yet. You didn't prepare? I'm like, no. Not sure. It's because I need to listen to the audience first. If I haven't been told who they are, and 80% of my work is who's my audience, what's going on. I ask the CEO, I want to interview people. I want to know in depth. And if I don't, then I need to listen first before I speak, because I don't know who's what's going on, what's happening, whose role is what's happening. And if I just start doing that, I'm just shooting into a dark room. I'd much rather listen, figure out what's going on before I do that. Abraham Lincoln had a great quote. He said, if I had 8 hours to chop down a tree, I spent 6 sharpening my axe.
That's a beautiful quote.
So to me, it's listening and figuring that out first, asking a ton of questions and just listening. Some of the best, most persuasive way to be is actually just to listen.
Tyus,
Yes.
we will be talking after the podcast, because my next question, you just asked him. No, I'm the one that's like sitting here like the sidekick to you on this podcast.
I didn't pass the ball to me.
You just slid in, and I had adapt into different audiences, which you just answered.
I take full blame.
And then he's like, and he gives you the oh, these are great questions, Tyus.
Well, I looked at your notes first. You shouldn't write them down and leave them on the table.
Well, I couldn't have cards today, unfortunately, but
Caught me lying again.
yeah, I know. But Rene, you speak. How many stages did you speak at last year?
Well, I looked at days.
Days
was 239.
Oh my goodness!
But a lot of those days were sometimes not a lot. Many of those days were 5 and 6 events.
So adapting to different audiences could be back to back.
Oh, yeah.
Could be week to week.
Yeah, day to day, hour
Day
to
to
hour.
day, hour to hour.
I mean, sometimes I'm talking to a group of salespeople. Then I might be the next hour I'm talking to a group of engineers, and then I might be talking to a women's group, and then I might be talking to 3 CEOs, or a room full of 600 CEOs. Totally different.
And
For a lot of people, the message. Sorry to just cut in. It's my show now.
Let's do it.
So, if for a lot of people that are really successful, they say the same message over and over and over again, and they've just figured out the great way to compartmentalize that. Does that mean that you have the same message with a bunch of different ways of presenting that message, or are you creating different speeches for every single audience?
So what I think you're referring to is there's some of the best speakers in the world have a product. It's like a movie, right? And their speech is the same every time you hear it, and it's perfect. I mean, the good ones, it's great. I mean, Ed Milet, you watch his talk, and he's got the same cadence. He gets down on his knees, talks about his dad, and I don't care how many times you watch it, it is just as compelling if you watch your favorite movie or listen to your favorite song.
Brings tears.
Yeah, and you know what's great? You know what to expect. It's predictable. It's a brand, right? And so that's the Keynote sort of perspective. Here's my Keynote, and if you're at his level, you can buy that for several $100,000. And people buy it all day long because they know what they're getting. And so for the rest of us, we might have to adapt a little bit more and say, okay, I don't get a chance to just say, here's what I got, come find me because I don't have a best-selling podcast or I'm not number one selling audio. There's a lot of, when you're at that level. But for the rest of us, we got to go, okay, who's my audience and how do I tailor this message to meet them? And so for me, it's saying, okay, I might have some of the similar stories, which would be acting as the frame, but I might have a different tie-down or lesson or moral at the end of that fits the audience. And so if I'm talking to a group of students, it's going to be a very different moral or lesson. The reason I share that with you is fill in the blank if I'm talking to a group of executives. And so if I'm talking about leadership to a group of executives at Vistage or a YPO, it's a very different conversation than it is if I'm talking to a group of sales let's say mortgage and real estate, which is very transactional thinking. How do I get the next deal? CEOs are thinking culture and future planning and bench strength and what's happening in innovation. Talk to somebody who's transactional. You're not thinking about bench strength. You're not thinking about what's happening in innovation. They go, how do I close the next? How do I get the next prospect? I need more leads. Very different outcomes needed.
And that's what we're working on with myself right now, looking at the audience and having different plans of I don't know if this is the right term, but plans of attack to speak to the audience. And it's incredible that there's so many stories that you're pulling out that now I'm resonating with. It's like, yeah, okay, I can have a tie down this way, etc. Again, I don't want to get into too much detail because we have a dinner to make, by the way. We have to shoot off to it. But before we kind of land this plane, so much has changed in the 30 years that you've been in this world. And there's new speakers that are coming out that have their style. And let me ask you, what do you think about the new style of public speakers, keynote speakers now?
I think you're going where I think you're going.
You don't have to name names.
No, what I'd say is this. There's different styles out there. And I respect somebody who gets results. And there's a lot of great speakers that have a very different style than I do, much louder. But I've also watched those same speakers that have a different style than me change people's lives. And I've watched people stop drinking and do things that are just incredible. And I think we need, the beauty of this environment is that we all have different tastes and we all have different things. What my caution would be that there's a lot of aspirational appeal happening right now. People appealing to the insecure, the quick win, the big money, and those things. And so if that's the approach, then I have a fundamental ethical basic challenge with it, which is nothing of high value in this world comes quick.
Nothing.
And you didn't build those biceps quickly. I mean, now you can take synthol and throw it in there, but then you look like a freaking alien. There's really no shortcut to the truly valuable. And when someone tells you that there is, I just say caution. Now, what I will tell you, I'm not saying that people can't give you a hack or cut off a couple years of learning. Absolutely. When somebody says, hey, I can speed the process, that's the beauty of a coach, the beauty of having a mentor. I just hired a new mentor yesterday. My first meeting with him today. We're going to dinner with him, Dave Meltzer. And now he's a friend, but man, this guy has so much knowledge that I'm like, I can speed my learning by being a student again. And so, but I also know if I don't act and work hard for the next 5 years on what he's saying to me, it's not going to be worth it. When I hired my social media person, I had a couple thousand followers. I had to restart my Instagram. And I told him, I'm not going to judge you for 3 years. He's like, 3 years? He goes, everybody wants something overnight. I'm like, well, that's not how it works. I'm 2 years into that.
What do you want? TikTok, like 1 million, right?
1 million on TikTok. We did that in the first 9 months. And our new Instagram account, because before I knew what was going on, I had an agency that bought followers. And so I think we were at 27,000. I think they bought like 15 of it. At first we wanted to get to past 10 because we wanted the swipe up feature. And I didn't care about it. I'm like, yeah, do whatever. It was like three grand or something like that. And then learning that that's not a good thing to do. And so people are like, what are you going to do? You got 27,000. I'm like, I'm speaking to a wall.
Nobody's there.
Nobody's there, right? Like, yeah, you see a number, but that's not real. And I go, I don't have any ego on this. And actually, I had to fight my ego on it, to be honest. It was like, okay, I have to do this. And I go, but you know what? What if I didn't have any ego? I would just start over. And I went to the guy, Mo, and I said, you know what? Either we're going to have a great story to tell that we started over and it worked, or we're going to realize that my content is bullshit. And either way, I'm going to grow. I said, so let's start over. People thought I was crazy. We skyrocketed to over 200,000 followers in like 6 months.
You know you're at right now, 212.
212.
That's a good number.
Yeah, here you go, 212. Yeah.
We're going to get more from him after this show, which I want to mention one more question, and then we're going to promote everything that you've got out there, because you bring so much value. Even on your Instagram, there's just so much free tidbits that I've got all my friends that are in so many different genres now to follow you. You can see all these blue ticks now starting to follow you, and they're all messaging me and getting like, hey, is there a mastermind coming to Vegas? I was like, oh, we might put some. Well, at the time, I was like, well, we might put something together. But everybody who's followed you, regardless what they're in, whether they're an athlete or whether they want to get into the public speaking, or whether they're somebody that's in the workplace, all can take so much knowledge from your Instagram and put it into their day-to-day. Obviously, you've got your book, Amplify. your Mastermind Amplify, you've got AmpCon, you've got so many different things out there. This is the platform that I want to leave you with before one last question before the end of the plane. But please tell the viewers, where can they find you, what's coming up, what you're excited about, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, one, thank you very much. I appreciate that. The whole goal with Instagram and TikTok was to make it micro-learning. And I wanted people to go there and say, I can just binge watch and learn everything that he says. And I wanted to give everything out there. And I suppose if you were to piece it all together, you'd have all my coursework, which is kind of cool. And if somebody was smart enough to do that, I'd probably hire him. I said, okay, let's just do this together.
You know, somebody's doing that right now, right?
I hope they are, man. It's an abundant world, man. But, Learn with Rene is Rene, R-E-N-E, 1E, Learn, L-E-A-R-N. And that's my Instagram and TikTok and my YouTube. And it's basically everything, I think, now. And so, but my website is Meet Rene, not M-E-A-T, by the way, M-E-E-T, Rene. I don't know where you get with M-E-A-T.
That's your OnlyFans page.
Exactly. And so, but what's funny? I said that joke one time, and one of my clients sent me an email. He goes, I bought meatrene.com. No. So you can just not forward it. I'm like, dude, that's so cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
So either way, you can find me there. But we have our book, Amplify Your Influence. We were #2 Wall Street Journal bestseller, USA Today bestseller, top 20 books, business books for 2022. Which it was really cool. It was a surreal experience to see that the ideas were liked. So you put your stuff out there, and people like it, so it means a lot. Of course, we have our Amplify course. All the stuff's on the website, meetrene.com. But the 2-day course that we went through. So our Mastermind is different than Amplify.
Please explain this, please.
So Amplify is the one where you're learning how to be on stage. You're learning how to create your ethos and your storytelling and the neuroscience. And that's that one we do right now. We're doing it once a month, sometimes twice a month. And you can find that on on the website. Just click on Amplify.
Put the links below.
And the Mastermind is more of an exclusive group. Those are people that are typically running a business, maybe a high-level executive, top sales professional. It's a bigger investment on purpose because we want to make it a very exclusive group. But we meet 3 times a year.
Great rooms.
Yeah, it's really, really cool people. Our next one, we have Ben Newman. If you don't know Ben Newman, go follow him. He's such a phenomenal, he's the #1 mental toughness coach in the world. But he's going to come in. It's going to be 40 of us, 30 to 40 of us in a room. And you got Ben for a day. It's so cool. His best friend is Andy Frisella and Ed Milet. So it just kind of tell you who he is.
Yeah.
Clinton Sparks, our boy, was there last time. And, so that's our Mastermind and of course, keynotes and everything. But you're going to be, I've got a couple clients, by the way, that I think I can bring you with. And I think we're going to do some stage time together.
Oh, beautiful.
I'll tell you about that.
Yeah. I'm honored that I've already had a lot of stage time with yourself already, crafting, this story of mine together and giving me the opportunity. Obviously
you were the gift, man.
Well, I'm going to say you are, so we'll just mutually agree. Otherwise, it's going to go back and forth. But you truly seen something in me when we first met, long before we had in-depth conversation. Obviously, there's so much shit on me out there too. But you and I met, just to give that story, at Keaton's event, Limitless.
No, we met at the gym.
That was the event weekend.
Right.
And Limitless, which I flew in.
By the way, mark your calendars, April 27th.
Incredible event.
Yes.
Shout out to my boy Keaton. Again, somebody who was doubted.
Yeah.
And probably put one of the best events on that I've been to all year round.
Never seen a more stacked stage.
Steve Aoki, David Goggins, Ed Milet, Andy Frisella, Gary V. The list goes on. All on that same stage, and that's when I met you.
Yeah.
Not at the event, but in the gym at that morning. And myself and Rene, obviously I heard the name, we got a train, and we just hit it off. And then at the event, then we kind of picked up where we left off. But needless to say, from that moment on, and with obviously the dialogue that's gone back and forth, you've truly seen something in me, really encouraged me to just go for it. Stop overthinking, Flax. I don't know how many times you've told me so many. Rene is full of nuggets, right? He'll say something, and because it's so relatable, and he uses so many bodybuilding analogies, I'm like, I can't even fight you on this. This is okay. Yeah, but what about Flax? You tell me a story. You're telling me an analogy, and I'm like, I'm not going to win this, am I?
No.
I'm not going to win this. So I would just want to say thank you so much for everything that you've done, doing, and soon to become. I truly have the best coach behind me. I had the best coach in bodybuilding, and now I feel like as long as I commit myself, which I am, to this process, turn up at all the amplifies, the masterminds, and everything that you've got of value, including your Instagram, and put it into my head and stop overthinking. There's levels to this game, and I'm going to level up tremendously. And
with the honor, it's truly an honor. And I mean, you are the easiest client to work with, and that's when Keaton told me, he goes, "You're going to meet Flex. You're going to love him. Everybody loves him." And Keaton is the mastermind behind that whole piece. So we love him. But for you, brother, I mean, you have done an iconic feat in this, and now it's shifting that to a new application. And I would say the message to anybody listening: you don't have to be a Flex Lewis to be able to have massive input and impact. The stories that are most impactful that you tell are how you learned how to do a handstand. I mean, being on stage is great. We love that. But then it's the lesson of just, almost cutting your arm off and being held on by just a centimeter. Less. And then learning how to do a handstand and walk. And that story, to me, when you were talking about, you would fall, but you caught a half a second. And and all you could think about was, well, what would a second, 3/4 of a second feel like? And you chase that 3/4. Then you got it. Well, what would a full second feel like? And you chase it for weeks. And then what would a second half? What would 2 seconds? And that 1 second at a time, that's what we talk about, 1 rep at a time.
1 rep at a time.
I think there's another book title. There's another one, though. You said it earlier.
Oh.
Unseen.
Oh.
The Unseen. And that might even be better. Oh, man. I don't know. But one of those, I think maybe that's your first book and your second book. They talk about the unseen work, the 1 rep at a time. Powerful stuff.
Well, since you popped that cherry, I may as well tell the audience that I'm working on my book right now, right?
Yes, you are.
Surprise. But last parting question before you and I have to hit the road. Who is your Mount Rushmore of speakers?
Oh, wow. Okay, hold on. All right. You have to put Tony Robbins on there. You got to respect. Then I'm going to put Benjamin Zander. He was the conductor for the Boston Philharmonic. I think one of the greatest speakers. Let's see what I would put up there. And I'm not going to say current. I want to think all time.
All time.
Yeah. From a speech perspective, you got to have Martin Luther King. I mean, what a compelling story. 250,000 people showed up. Not to see him speak. They showed up because they believed what he was talking about. And they showed up for themselves. That is, not to see you, but your dream is also my dream. And when he died, that dream continued. That's the ultimate. It wasn't about him. And so, I mean, that's really cool. And then, who would I give my last one? My mother.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Amazing.
That's the coolest question I've been asked in a long time.
Well,
and no disrespect to the Eds and the other iconic speakers out there. They're going to go down on that same list. I'm just going back to people that previous to that.
Well, what a beautiful way to end the show. Your mother is obviously living through you and touching, the future speakers that are on stage, including myself. So for her to be on your Mount Rushmore and for us to be chasing our first big stages, I just think that's the best way to end this show, my friend. I'm truly honored to have you. I hope everybody at home has taken everything from this podcast and will be implemented into their lives. And you will see a lot more with myself and Rene on many different stages in many different states. And I'm excited to, showcase what I've learned from this great man and put it into you guys, the audience. So from me, Rene, we are out.